Here's the deal. Every problem people complain about in Winston-Salem is actually a plus for the right buyer. See, traffic is heavy at certain times, not all day. Construction noise means property values are climbing. Older homes with character? Well, you just don't get that in newer suburbs. So, let me show you 15 things that will tell you if Winston-Salem is your city or if you should just keep looking. And stay until the end because, of course, the most important one is last. Let's get started. People here actually drive the speed limit, which throws a lot of newcomers off. But that's not the real story. What really matters is when traffic happens, not how fast people are driving. Between about 8 and 8:30 or so in the mornings, you're looking at probably an extra 5 minutes of drive time. Not terrible, right? Well, here's where it gets very real for you. From about 4:30 to 5:15 or so in the evenings, you could see an extra 5, 10, and if there's a fender bender, 15 minutes added to your commute. And if that's not manageable enough in your eyes, here's what makes it a little more manageable. If you can avoid those exact windows Monday through Friday, you'll literally never be annoyed at traffic. Traffic here is very specific about timing. It's not all day gridlocks like you might get in nearby metros, Charlotte or Raleigh. And here's what I think people miss. You're dealing with traffic because you're so close to proximity to Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, one of the biggest anchors, by the way, in our area, or you're close to schools, you're close to jobs. And that kind of location makes everyday life easier and helps homes hold their value. See, traffic here shows up at very specific times, not all day. And speaking of roads, there's a specific interchange that needs to have its own conversation. Now, the morning commute can slow things down across the city. That's just a part of it, though. But there's really one place where you feel it the most, and that is US 52 and I-40 or Salem Parkway. At those two intersections, rush hour can stack up fast. But here's what's important. This isn't being ignored. See, big road projects are already happening. The Northern Beltway, 34.5 miles of new highway, is tying US 52 into Salem Parkway and I-40. And that will be completed in 2026, the eastern half. The western half, it's been funded, but most likely won't start construction until 2030. And let me tell you how this usually plays out. Once those roads come online, drive times get extremely better. And buyers who understand this already know what tends to follow. Areas near major road improvements usually see values move up over time. So yeah, the slowdown you're sitting in today is temporary. The upside from better roads sticks around a lot longer. And if I were in your shoes, I'd see this as getting in before the infrastructure fully catches up. Now, let's talk about something that affects anyone who moves here, no matter what time you're commuting. So spring doesn't quietly show up in Winston-Salem. It makes quite an entrance. And if you've been here for more than 5 minutes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The pollen is very real here, and it sticks around a little longer than people expect. See, tree pollen in the spring, grass in the early summer, and ragweed or pine in the fall. It's basically a rotating cast, if you will. Let me tell you, I never had allergies until I moved here. Now I'm checking the Forsyth County pollen forecast like it's part of my morning routine. And pollen might make you sneeze, but if you have kids, the school system here will make you think. I'll explain why in a second. But first, here's the deal. That pollen comes from something people absolutely love about this city. Mature trees, lush neighborhoods, green everywhere. That's what gives this place, places like Renolda Gardens with their 129 acres of walking paths and green space. That's why neighborhoods like Ardmore and West End feel the way they do with those tree-lined streets and a real canopy coverage. And that shade makes a noticeable difference in our summers. At the end of the day, you can take an allergy pill, or I recommend one of those inhalers. What you can't do is fast forward decades of tree growth. And those mature trees are a big reason why Winston-Salem still feels settled and easy to live in, even with all that construction downtown happening right this second. So, downtown Winston-Salem, it's a little loud right now. There's no way around around it. Cranes are in the air, detours are popping up, streets closing and reopening, and construction noise, well, it's pretty much everywhere you turn. And it's not random. There's a lot happening at once. You've got the $85 million renovation of the Stevens Center, a new 5,000-seat amphitheater coming in at about $25 million, and a 28-acre expansion of the Innovation Quarter. A lot of this comes between 2026 and 2027, with other pieces continuing for the rest of the decade. So if you're living downtown right now, well, you might be feeling this, but here's what matters. This is a serious investment. When I moved here in 2009, downtown was basically, I kid you not, Foothills Brewery, and that's about it. But today, you got multiple breweries, a distillery, growing restaurant scene, all packed into a very walkable core that actually stays open well past 10 p.m., unlike some of our other pockets. So that construction noise you're hearing means growth. It's why downtown prices are sitting in the high 500s on average, and why people who understand the long game are paying attention. Just keep this in mind. If you want that downtown lifestyle, you're probably still gonna need a car. Now, if you're watching this and thinking you want help figuring out which of these trade-offs actually matters most for you, that's my favorite part. That's what I do. Whether it's knowing when traffic actually shows up or finding the right neighborhood with character that you want without the extra hassle, I help people make those calls every day. My contact info is in the description below. All right, enough selling, let's move on. Now that we've talked about walkable urban cores, here's how Winston-Salem actually stacks up. The city really has one, and it's compact. It covers downtown, part of West End, and Ardmore and West Salem, and that's pretty much it. Outside of those areas, you're driving, and that's just the reality here. This city's overall walk score sits around 22, I think, out of 100, which should tell you a lot. Downtown itself is a different story. It's almost 80, so it's actually quite walkable. But once you move past the core, well, daily life shifts quickly. And the bus system does exist, but let me be honest with you, it's limited. Weekend hours are light, and Sunday service shuts down at 6:30. For most people, that just doesn't work for a long term. This is more than just how you get around. It shapes your routine, your housing options, and which neighborhoods make sense for you. If you're coming from a place like New York, thinking you'll ditch your car entirely, this is probably a reality check. But here's the flip side. What you give up in walkability, you gain in space and quiet. Real neighborhoods, yards, streets that aren't overloaded, you're getting at a price point that you just don't see in big North Carolina cities. And here's where it gets even more interesting. You'll see why this car-dependent setup actually protects that small-town character people move here for. I'll talk about more of that later on. Now, the balance between walkable and space shapes almost everything here. And it even plays into how the school system works, which we're going to cover now. Most cities give you one assigned school and call it done. Winston-Salem gives you choice, but it comes with some logistics. For elementary schools, you live in a choice zone with usually 5 to 7 schools to choose from, and you're guaranteed one of your top 3 choices. Here's the catch. You're not necessarily guaranteed to be on the bus route, and the trade-offs for having options is now a lot more significant. See, since August of 2025, families with kids attending schools outside their residential zones have had to arrange their own transportation. Middle and high schools aren't zoned the same way. You go where your address is assigned. But for most families, they've been able to get into schools outside of their zone as long as it's not Reagan or West Forsyth. Those two are pretty darn full, and probably your out-of-zone request will not happen. Here's why this matters. Families get real flexibility and choice. Magnet programs create special education paths in STEM, arts, IB, and language that many cities just don't offer. If you're the type of parent who researches schools like you're buying stocks, this city is built for you. But if you want to keep it simple with just one assigned school, it might feel a little bit like homework. The system rewards parents who do that homework, which is exactly the type of buyer driving demand in the best neighborhoods. And trust me, Those neighborhoods don't look anything like what you'd expect. Which brings me to my next point. You could have a house in the low 200s next to a house in the 500s at the exact same time next to a house next to 900-ish, and then a house that's 1.3, all on the same street. Same block even. See, Winston-Salem is not like Charlotte or Raleigh, which have a lot of planned neighborhoods or organized zoning. Winston-Salem grew naturally over a long time, so that kind of growth created a lot of variety. In the outer areas like Clemens or Louisville, you could have a low 200s house next to a high 900s house. It's just, frankly, normal here. Ardmore is the perfect example. The neighborhood sits on average in the upper 3s, but within a few blocks, you'll see everything from a teardown to a completely renovated showpiece. That mix creates opportunity if you know where to look. You can find incredible value. You're not locked into HOA neighborhoods where every house looks exactly the same. You'll get character, you get variety, and you get upside potential if you're willing to do the work. But that inconsistency has a reason, and it ties directly into when most of these homes were actually built. See, the best addresses in Winston-Salem, Ardmore, West End, Buena Vista, well, those come with a timestamp between early 1900s through the 1960s. Many were built in that era. They come with charm, character, and yes, sometimes old house challenges. Outdated plumbing and electrical sometimes, potential asbestos and lead-based paint, occasionally foundational problems from Winston-Salem's heavy red clay soil. Not like little stuff. Real issues that you might have to deal with. Homeowners insurance costs are going up, especially for these older properties. Now, before you write off older homes entirely, wait until you see what insurance companies are actually worried about. I'll break that down in a minute. Now, here's my favorite thing to tell people. I would rather have a 50-year-old home that's been remodeled than a 15 to 20-year-old builder-grade house that frankly is still untouched or original. See, these homes have true character, probably walkability, and resale demand that newer suburbs will probably never match. West End has large historic homes on small lots with Victorian, Craftsman, Colonial Revival styles, and you can walk to downtown in less than 5 minutes. That's something you just can't replace. If you want new construction, well, you get that most likely outside of the city limits. Clemens, Louisville, Kernersville, bigger lots, quieter streets, modern systems. Homes there usually range in the low to mid 3s, all the way up well past the 6s, and frankly 7 figures depending on the size. So, you're choosing between historic character with urban proximity or suburban space with modern systems. Both are great, just different. And both deal with the specific challenge that comes from the soil and climate here. About 90 degrees with 71% humidity. That's not a heat wave. That's a typical summer day in Winston-Salem from June through basically September, early September. Summers can be hot and humid here. Average highs are usually in the 90s, humidity averaging about 70%. It usually peaks out in mid to late July and early August at 76% humidity. That combo creates what people call uncomfortable humidity. You're running your AC hard, and that means higher electric bills. And here's where it gets tricky for older homes. Winston-Salem's heavy clay soil holds water. When you mix that with high humidity and temperature swings, you get drainage and crawl space moisture problems. When humidity in a crawl space goes over 60%, it becomes a breeding ground for the M word, I'm not gonna say it out loud, wood rot and unwanted pests. That can lead to some serious structural damage if it's not handled. Here's the upside people forget. Winters are really mild. You avoid that harsh northern cold most winters. Not here recently, but most winters. You get outdoor living almost year-round. A lot of sellers take care of moisture issues, and once they fix it, these homes turn into really solid long-term buys. If I were buying an older home here, I'd budget for a crawl space fix or a drainage system. Think of it as part of the purchase, not a deal breaker, and a lot of the houses already have one installed. So, Let's shift from property conditions to how you'll actually spend your time here. If you're expecting clubs open until 2 a.m. and late night dining options at every corner, I'm gonna be honest with you, we need to adjust those expectations right now. Winston-Salem is a very family-focused town. Restaurants close earlier than big cities. The nightlife scene is pretty quiet compared to a Charlotte or Raleigh. Let me break down what the scene actually looks like now, because things have changed a ton since I moved here. When I got here, downtown was basically Foothills Brewery. Now, we've got a bunch of great breweries, a distillery, tons of great restaurants, all walkable, all staying open well past 10 p.m. The brewery scene is thriving. Multiple craft breweries have fantastic live music events and food trucks. It's not necessarily clubbing until 2 or 3 a.m. You might find one or two, but it's not rolling up the sidewalks at 8 p.m. either. If you're looking for a slower-paced, low-stress lifestyle instead of Charlotte or Atlanta chaos, well, this is probably perfect. The nightlife matches the city. It's there if you want it, but it's not overwhelming. And that modest lifestyle actually helps keep some costs manageable in ways you might not expect. Here's a cost nobody budgets for until closing day. And then it shows up like an uninvited guest on your monthly payment. For some buyers, this $200 to $300 a month expense is the difference between affording the house they really want or settling for their backup choice. Homeowners insurance premiums are going up across the country, and it's surprising some buyers during the closing process. This is especially hitting older homes in historic areas. Replacement costs in these places are higher and structural risks go up with age. Here's the good news. Winston-Salem avoids those hurricane risk premiums. And you also don't see flood insurance spikes common in places like Wilmington or the Outer Banks. We're far enough inland, I should say, that we dodge the worst of it. Some flood risks exists in the FEMA flood zones or along Silas Creek or Salem Creek and Muddy Creek, where homes can be close to the flood zone. Perhaps their lots are in, but very rarely is the house in the flood zone. Overall, though, this isn't coastal Florida pricing. When I'm working with buyers, I always say, let's get that insurance quote early in the process. No surprises at closing. Factored into your monthly budget alongside your mortgage, taxes, and HOA fees if you have any. If rising insurance makes your monthly payment unworkable, better to know that in the very beginning than, of course, anywhere near closing. It's a legitimate deal breaker for some buyers, and that's okay. Speaking of differences in price and costs, there's one area where lower costs comes with a few things you really need to think about. This one's a sensitive subject. East Winston is pretty mixed. There's real potential here, but the execution varies drastically from block to block. Winston-Salem State University anchors this area. This place is seeing revitalization efforts and investment. But let me be honest with you. Street quality and conditions vary big time from block to block. You could have a beautifully renovated home on one block and seriously neglected 2 streets over, or frankly, a couple houses over. It's genuinely quite mixed. Here's why some buyers are paying attention. Ongoing redevelopment can mean upside, especially for buyers who know what to look for. Homes range from the mid to upper 100s all the way into the upper 200s, low 300s, offering entry points you won't find in Ardmore or West End. The neighborhood is close to Salem Lake, just about 3 to 5 minutes from downtown via US 52 or back roads. The bones are there. The location is there. This is an investor-friendly territory, not first-time homebuyer territory most likely. Can be though, for the right buyer. If you don't have the experience to evaluate block-to-block risk, or a local agent who does, you should work with someone who knows the micro markets. I'm talking street-by-street knowledge. That's the only way to handle it successfully. And the same street-by-street knowledge matters across the city, especially when you're running errands or grabbing dinner. Which brings me to my next point. If you want Target, Whole Foods, and your favorite restaurant all within a 2-minute drive, well, Winston-Salem might disappoint you. See, everything is about 5 to 10 minutes away, spread out in different areas. Haynes Mall and the Haynes Mall Boulevard corridor have the highest concentration of big box stores. Target, Walmart, Best Buy, all the major chains. By the way, we avoid it like the plague come the holiday season because it gets a little crowded. That's the busiest commercial area in the city, but it's not walkable. You need to drive from store to store. Thruway Shopping Center near Buena Vista has more upscale spots like Harris Teeter and local boutiques. Renolda Village gives you boutiques, galleries, and local restaurants in a very charming setting. Those two locations are walkable once you're there. Downtown has 4th Street restaurants and Trade Street Art District. It's all great. They're all separate. This avoids the overcrowding and traffic you get in cities with dense shopping areas. You're not sitting in parking lot gridlock at a lifestyle center. Each area does its own thing. You just drive to whichever one fits what you need. Having everything spread out across means less concentrated chaos and more neighborhood character. And if you think the shopping feels spread out, well, wait until you see what suburban actually means here. 10 to tops 15 minutes west of downtown, you can be standing in the middle of a working farm. I kid you not. That's not an exaggeration. That's Clemens on a Tuesday. See, Clemens, Louisville, Advance, these areas are calm, spread out, family-oriented, and it can get rural fast. And that might surprise people coming from a denser metro area. And here's why that's a good thing. You get easy access to everything downtown and in the city, but you also get space, privacy, and quiet streets. These are huge draws for people moving here. Clemens usually sees homes in the upper 300s, low 400s, all the way up, probably averaging a little closer to 600 these days. Louisville ranges from the lower 4s all the way up into the millions. It's the highest per capita zip code, and you're getting larger lots and most likely newer construction in a lot of these cases, and excellent schools like West Forsyth High. When I show families these areas, I always point out Tanglewood Park, which is 1,100 acres with 2 championship golf courses, an arboretum, horseback riding, camping, the Festival of Lights. That's basically in your backyard. The suburban feel is intentional. It's quiet. It's family focused. If that's what you're after, well, you'll love it. And that balance between space and urban energy is what defines Winston-Salem. To wrap this up, let me tell you this. Winston-Salem is what we call a small big city. Almost 700,000 people live in this metro area, but it feels like 150. And I mean that in the best possible way. It's tough to keep secrets in this town. The culture here is more talkative, outgoing, southern. Really different from up north, the Midwest, or out west. And I've lived in all of those. If you're used to big city anonymity, that takes some getting used to. But here's what you get in return. Big city convenience without big city chaos. We're North Carolina's 5th largest city, but we don't feel like it. We have Wake Forest University, Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center with top-level trauma and cancer centers. We have the Innovation Quarter with 330 acres focused on biotech and tech growth. You get UNCSA, one of the top art schools in the country that my wife went to, producing incredible performances. You've got Old Salem museums and gardens, a preserved Moravian settlement from the 1700s, all in a city that still feels incredibly easy to live in. Most commutes here run about 10 minutes, way below the Charlotte or Raleigh area. You're not spending your life in traffic. And that community feel, that friendliness, that southern hospitality is one of the biggest reasons people move here and stay. You know your neighbors, you run into people at the grocery store. It feels like home faster than most cities. And here's the common thread with all 15 of these things. Nobody really says it out loud. Winston-Salem works best for people who are thinking long-term. If you're just chasing what's easy right now, well, this might not be your place. But if you're building a life over the next several years, a lot of these trade-offs actually start working in your favor. And if you're thinking about making Winston-Salem your home, shoot me an email at blake@theginthergroup.com today. I'd love to help you explore all these neighborhoods in person and find the area that matches what matters most to you. And if you want to dive deeper, I've linked my next complete pros and cons breakdown. Watch the next one to see the full picture of what living here actually looks like day to day. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you on the next one.